I've never taken a business risk in my life. You know, I'd moved on. I'd recognised my weaknesses, as you do in business. You recognise your weaknesses and you address them. Find hacks to get to the answer, get to where everybody else was.
In this episode, I speak to Theo Paphitis, Dragon's Den star and champion for small business through his Small Business Sunday initiative. We learn from how he overcome and found hacks and works around within education and business for dyslexia, growing and selling his first business that led to the acquisition of Ryman, which he's very well known for, and his time at Millwall Football Club. My name's Richard Osborne, and this is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF. It's a pleasure to meet you. You're obviously somebody I've been aware of right from the very beginning of Dragon's Den, when I'm a follower of Dragon's Den, and where I think a lot of people the public got introduced to you. One of the things which I think is really important is focusing an education on the individuals and that resonates with those individuals themselves in an engaging way. Something I would like to mention is, for example, we know, because we did some research into this, that 10,000 16 to 17 year olds every year start their own businesses. And when you think about the age of those 16 and 17, they have not gone through any education aspect of what it's like to start their own business. And they've been through an institution that talks and teaches people how to memorise for exams, as opposed to teaches them how to run a business or how to do what they're doing. How do you feel about that, I suppose, would be your first question. And if you was thinking about sort of education itself and the impact it had on you and the difference how you've developed in your life, how would it have impacted yourself when learning at an earlier age or about business itself at, say, in your teenage years?
Programs like Dragon's Den and The Apprentice, but very much Dragon's Den, in my humble view, have done more over the past, I don't know how many years it's been going for now. It could be nearly 20 years. Gosh, I mean, 4. Yeah, we must be 18 years, something like that. Have done more to explain and teach business to the public, and especially youngsters, than any school has. And if I was even bolder, I'd go than most universities, apart from applied economics, which was never our job. But certainly commerce and business, the generality of running a business and entrepreneurism. And entrepreneurism wasn't a word that was used as a career. You know, you didn't say when your careers teacher saw you at school, if you had one, and you had your 5 minutes with she gave you a couple of brochures and sent you on your way. And if you were asked, what is it you want to do? No one turned around and said, oh yes, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't a career. It wasn't something that was recognised as a proper career path. Although there was millions of people out there doing exactly that. And the fact that 50% of all small businesses failed in the first couple of years, might be a few percent lower, but I generalise most things, it's there or thereabouts, says it all. The fact that businesses don't survive, but those people that fail in the first venture don't necessarily fail in the next venture or their third venture, and eventually many of them go on to have successful businesses. But what a painful way to learn how to be an entrepreneur, how to be creative in business, how to create a business, how to be a founder, how to put your idea in practice. What are the things I need to know? And what if I don't know those things? What could possibly go wrong? Because my enthusiasm for and my passion surely will get me through everything. No, it won't. It'll get you a long way, but it won't get you through everything. So Dragon's Den has definitely lifted the lid on so many things as far as business and youngsters. And even in my day when I did Dragon's Den for just over 8 years, my mailbag, vast majority was from school kids, university kids, people who are just starting. They're the ones that were hungry for the information, hungry for the knowledge, wanted to know. And you ask yourself, well, why don't they know?
I'm going to jump ahead of some of my notes here, because as we're mentioning in Dragon's Den, I think something which some people listening to this, and I see these questions on UKBF as well when people are looking for investment. You previously, and you quoted the first season of Dragon's Den changing your mind about this. But what you came to was you'd rather invest in a great person, my words, with an okay idea than an okay person with a great idea. Why is that? Because,
as we constantly had to explain to people very early doors in Dragon's Den, this is not a Saturday night quiz show where you win a prize and you walk away with a prize. We, as Dragons, we're never going to go and run your business for you. We can't. We've got our own businesses, our own lives. We're there to invest and mentor to a level and guide and maybe open our contact book as required. But we're never going to run your business. Sadly, in the early years, people got an investment and actually thought they'd been on a Saturday evening quiz show, spun the wheel of fortune, and had walked away with a prize, and that was it. You know, somebody, one of the Dragons, now has put money in and they're going to go and run your business for you, and you can put your feet up and have a cigar. And we had a few failures on the back of that, and it became very clear that we had to make that point absolutely undoubted in their minds that they hadn't won a prize. They'd won an opportunity to accelerate and a higher chance of success their business or business idea.
I'd love to sort of move back to your journey that took you to where you are now. And one of the things that I thought was, and I can't think of any other word to use other than lovely, is that you met Mrs. P at your first job.
Nothing lovely about Mrs. P. Oh my gosh, if she could only hear you, she'd be your biggest fan.
Well, just in case she hears it, then I'll say it again. It sounded lovely. But what I'd like to ask is, because what I want to get to understand is how you feel and your mindset during the journey as you was moving towards Ryman and the buying Ryman. So at that early stage, your first career was effectively a government-funded scheme. Now, for me, I don't know if it's the same because mine was YTS. I don't know if it was the same scheme YTS, but that was my first.
I'm obviously a lot older than you.
A couple of years. Maybe.
Mine was very simple. The government of the day said, look, if you hire somebody who hasn't had a job before, because there's a lot of school leavers on the dole. There was no jobs. We're talking now in the mid-70s. There was lots of unemployment and lots of people on the dole. Especially youngsters who couldn't get a job. And they gave an incentive and said, look, if you hire a youngster under the age of blob who hasn't had a job before, we will give you an allowance against your tax of £1,500 per annum. Yeah. That's not a month, per annum.
And that's effectively what your salary was for that.
That's exactly what it was. There. So all of a sudden, all these jobs appeared at £1,500. And most of them were really just to be skivvies, tea boys. Just people say, well, why don't we take someone on? It's free money. It's a free employee. And most of them died after the first year, sadly, because once they needed to start paying and then paying a proper salary, people will let go. So it was good. Yeah, so it was good to get people. Well, yeah, I mean, in fairness, they did say at the time they didn't know how they're going to cope without me, but they're going to try. Now, in fairness, I could have stayed, but there was no job. There was no proper job. There was no proper career progression. It was probably the wrong job for me in the first place. I was a sort of assistant to the tea stirrer and filing clerk. So my job was to come in the morning, get all the telexes off the telex machine, cut them into little strips, glue them on an A4 piece of paper, distribute them to the brokers where all they were due for. So they're going to it was Lloyds of London brokerage. So they would then go walk across London Bridge, go to Lloyds of London, place the risk, it's an insurance risk. I'd make them their tea, go and get their dry cleaning, anything else that they needed. And when they went to Lloyds of London to place the risks, I'd have to take out the files, do the filing from yesterday's work, bring out the new files that were required for open new files. Now, tea I was very good at. Running errands I was very good at. Having conversation with them and being likeable I was good at. Sadly, my issues at school came to the fore quite clearly when it came to filing.
Yeah.
I was a dyslexic filing clerk. It's like having the one-armed dishwasher in the restaurants of the old days. You've got a challenge. So files were always a bit tricky to find.
So how did, when you're a young person, you've just left school, you're trying to find a job, and from what I understand, sending like 100 CVs out, covering letters, as somebody who's is dyslexic, and not getting the interviews, not getting the jobs, you then get given a job to then let go.
But to be honest with you, at the time when I was sending all those letters out, applications for jobs, because there was no email or faxes or anything there. It was all with envelope and a stamp, and you could call up for an application form and they'd send it to you and fill it out, or you'd send a letter in asking for an application form. And I just didn't get it. I couldn't understand why nobody would employ me. I was expecting to be snapped up in my own little mind. Of course, with hindsight, if I'd have received the application forms filled in the way I probably filled them in, or the letters the way I sent the letters, I probably wouldn't give me the job either. There was no support. There was no support to actually help me get a job and show me how to fill an application properly, and realise that I had the spelling was shocking and the handwriting was shocking, and I wasn't putting my best foot forward.
When you're in that position, you're expected to get. What was your, I suppose, ambition or motivation? How was you feeling at that time, at the very beginning of your career ladder?
Well, my self-esteem was on the floor. So I'd gone from a confident youngster to actually having zero self-esteem and confidence, because nobody would give me a job. But I'd reached a stage where, quite frankly, I would have taken any job You could have offered me a job in a sewer. I would have taken it. So when I took the job as a filing clerk assistant to the tea stirrer, my God, I thought I'd arrived, because I was so happy to get a job, any job.
With the added bonus that Mrs. P was there.
Well, that was that obviously I didn't expect, except I'd met her at the interview, and she was obviously took one look at me and thought, he's a catch, and gave me the fluttering eyelashes, and we got into conversation. And obviously on my first day, I said, "Hello, do you remember me?" And it didn't take long. It didn't take long. She, I fell for her charms, and she humoured me. And before I knew it, we were an item.
You then moved from there, and I'm going to put the sort of next two steps closely together. Okay. Where you became a salesperson for selling watches, which you was there for a period of time, and my interpretation there is, if I'm putting words in your mouth and making the right assumption, you moved towards sales there, using natural sales ability,
and that really was where I should have always been, right? So you know, as I said to you, I was happy to take any job. I needed a job, but finding my first job in retail was like, even on the first day, I just knew I'd arrived. Unlike my previous job, where I thought getting up in the morning was painful, I couldn't wait to get in. I'd be happy to work a 6-day week, you know, and get the overtime. I'd happy to go in early or stay late. It didn't really matter. You know, the stars were aligned. I was getting rewarded for the extra effort, and I was enjoying it. And surprisingly, when you're passionate and you're enjoying something and get rewarded accordingly, you invariably become good at it. And dealing with the public was something I really enjoyed doing, and my love for watches really came from there, and has stayed with me all my life. And my love for retail came from there, and that was working for Watches of Switzerland in Old Bond Street, as it was then, on the corner.
Yeah. And then a friend of the family or somebody you knew came in and provided you with the next opportunity, which if my research is correct, also gave you the opportunity to get a mortgage and get on the property ladder and take your first home as well.
Yeah, I joined insurance, left insurance. It was basically selling insurance, if you like to say it, or similar. In those days you had brokers, and you'd go around and you'd service your brokers, and they'd put the business with your company. It gave me a company car, which was a 1.3 Vauxhall Chevette, but it was a rust-coloured, orangey sort of brown colour, which I thought was like, oh wow. Working for an insurance company in those days, or a bank, you got subsidised mortgages. Mortgage rates were like 10%, and you were paying like 2%, so you could afford to buy a house. So again, I was using the skills that I had to move into a different career path using the same skills, and now I'm in a more I've got a career path that I'm more comfortable with, and whilst I still had the same difficulties, I was able to recognise those difficulties, and I matured and understood, deal with some of them. For instance, when I worked in the insurance brokerage, my first job as the filing clerk, assistant tea boy to the tea stirrer, as I came out the station, London Bridge Station, just near the office, there was a Ryman Stationers in Borough High Street, and I walked into Ryman Stationers, and with my first paycheck, maybe my second, because I still had a Saturday and Sunday job, working in the Wimpy bar. I couldn't let that go because I was earning so little money. I needed a Saturday and Sunday job at the Wimpy bar as well. But I spent a few quid on a calligraphy set. So with an italic pen and nibs and some ink cartridges. And I retaught myself to write in a very nice, neat way. I also got given, about a few months afterwards, a dictionary, a little pocket dictionary, purchased from Ryman in Borough High Street, by Mrs. P, who realised that I couldn't spell for toffees, and she said, "I've bought you this." She wrote in the insert, I've still got it, it's in my study at home. She wrote in the insert, she said, "Keep it, it's only a small little thing, but it's a dictionary, keep it in your pocket at all times. To never leave the house without it." So I've now learned to write properly, neatly, and I've realised I can't spell for toffees, and it's most a weakness of mine. And I've got a dictionary in my pocket, so every time I've got to write something, if I need to look up a word, 9 times out of 10 I'll find it. But if I can't, sometimes I have to choose a different word because I can't get close enough to the spelling to find it in the dictionary. There's no autocorrect. So, I'd moved on. I'd recognised my weaknesses, as you do in business. You recognise your weaknesses and you address them. And once you start addressing your weaknesses, you become stronger. So I'm in the right career path, and I'm addressing some of my issues.
Yeah, and this comes across to me as quite a big sort of milestone in your career path as you reach this point. So at that point you've had this moment in your life, this moment in your career where you're identifying these areas that weaknesses and addressing them. Your career, your life, and you're making a home, you're reaching that stage in life. It then, the word whirlwind is coming to mind here, really, to the point that leads, what are the key milestones, I suppose, towards the point where Ryman and that actually came into the picture?
Oh, that was much, much later. That's mid-90s. I mean, you've moved on quite a bit. Don't forget, we started off in the mid-70s and then we're going to the mid-90s. That's a 20-year span. But being in the right career path, using my skill sets, identifying my weaknesses, also you start identifying your strengths. And being dyslexic all the way through school, you're having to problem solve. Well, every dyslexic I know will say the same thing. You can't do things the same way as everyone else. That doesn't mean you're stupid or you're thick, right? You're certainly as bright, if not brighter than others, but you can't absorb that information and store it on your hard disk the same way as other people can, and then make that recall. So you spend your life learning how to problem solve, how to get round those difficulties, how to be normal, how to be like everyone else. And even in the classroom, so I would be in a maths class, I might be doing algebra or something else, but I couldn't take in the way to approach a formula, a way to approach something. But you know what? I was determined, and I found my own way. Found my own way to remember things, my own way to deal with things, workarounds, cheats, hacks now. I call them cheats, they'll be called hacks now. Find hacks to get to the answer, get to where everybody else was. Problem with that, it normally took you that little bit longer. But as you practiced and practiced and practiced, you could practically get up to speed with everybody else. But believe you me, you're doing it totally in a different way. Nothing like the teacher taught you. You found your own solutions. And that problem solving really is where that was the next strength I was able to identify in myself, but not by just literally consciously saying, oh, I'm a good problem solver. I was able to actually see it in practice, as in my working life. I would subconsciously solve issues and problems as part of my job. And that gave me the strength to actually look at businesses and understand businesses and solve problems within businesses.
So what doors did that open up then for you at that in those early years?
It allowed me again to move away from working for somebody else to set up my own business in commercial finance, to identify difficult businesses that needed help I could add something to, and that problem solving is what then allowed me to get into business properly. That's the wrong word, properly, but into a more structured way. It's wrong, because my first business was myself and a partner and an assistant. He left shortly afterwards, still a great friend of mine, Michael McCrodden of our door, but I was just left with Joe, our assistant. So I always joke about one man and a dog, and I used to always get a punch in the face. But we had a very tiny little business. It was 2 people, but we were able again to start learning about business, understanding business, more structured, and how the management of businesses, the solving of problems in businesses.
Okay, and how long was that business running for, and sort of what was that journey like?
Oh, that journey again was roller coaster. It was going into the unknown. Most people, from my period, did really go into the unknown. There's no need for it. Now, that's what I'm saying. The education means you don't have to go into the unknown, but we did. So our chance of failure was much, much higher. But I was fortunate. So I saw some success. I was able to sell that business into another business very quickly within a few years, run the new business, grow that, see new opportunities in bigger businesses. So, so my education was from the University of Life in Business, but it doesn't have to be like that. And what we need is entrepreneurialism education. It doesn't all have to be done in the classroom. It can be done in a practice, and then we need to make sure that we have support for small businesses within the business community, the economic community. These are all very, very important.
And is this why I'm chopping and changing? I've got notes here on a SBS pad.
Yeah, that's what we like.
From Ryman. I'm chopping and changing the agenda as we're talking.
Were you there?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, we know what goes on then. So SBS, Small Business Sunday, and it all came from Twitter. And one day, basically, someone said, "You've got to go on Twitter." I think it was while we're filming Dragon's Den. So myself and Peter and Duncan got ourselves on Twitter, and by the weekend, I had like 50,000 followers. I thought, blimey, this is amazing. I had 50,000 people want to hang on my word, are interested in what I say. And when I did have my own small business, every Sunday night we'd bath the kids, get the kids to bed on a Sunday night, go like every other, mother and father that trying to run a business, and you'll go, now the kids are in bed, now I've got to think about work. So Sunday night would be where I'd want to hit the ground running on a Monday. So once the kids went to bed, I needed a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours in my study. I didn't have a study in those days. It was a kitchen table, right? Later on I had a study. But so the kitchen table and start planning for Monday. I want to hit the ground on Monday morning running. I want to be ready. I want to take on the world. And it was a great time. And one of the things that I always found difficult, not difficult, everybody does, was marketing. Looking for new prospects, looking for new business, and expensive. And then it occurred to me, this tool I had in my hand, the new mobile phone, there was 50,000 people there. If I'd had in a day, they probably wouldn't understand the word I was typing out, mind you, my dyslexia, but if I'd had, without autocorrection, but if I'd had in a day, I could market to those people. And I thought, what a valuable tool for small businesses. And I was talking to Mrs. P about it, and I said, I've had an idea. And she was doing her chores and all her bits and pieces, and she said, what's that? I said, I'm going to tweet out there and just ask for six businesses to let me have details of their business, and I'm going to retweet them to 50,000 potential customers. She said, that's a good idea. So I did the first, and that was on a Sunday night, and I did the first unplanned tweet saying, if you tweet me your business, I'll retweet it. I'll choose 6 and retweet the best 6. My God, it went bing, 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 went nuts. And it took us hours. It took me and Miss P hours and hours to go through them and decide which 6 to retweet. So we did it. Following Sunday, I forgot all about it. And all of a sudden, ping, 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 people started doing it the following Sunday. And it got a laugh of its own. Then I had to say, oh, hold on guys, we did it, but I said we'll have to limit it between 5 and 7:30, because then that suited my time, my time. And so that's over 10 years ago, where we started in 2010. God, it's 13 years ago. And from then onwards, every Sunday between 5 and 7:30, if you tweet me your small business, go through it and we retweet our best 6, you then become an SBS winner. You get access to the website, self-help tools, a whole community, conferences that we have annually every year, more local ones as well that self-generated by SBS winners, and all the tools and help that you need in helping you along the way in your small business. And that's how SBS started, and 13 years later, we've got over 3,700 winners, and now of course we tweet the winners on a Monday night because it takes too long to do it on a Sunday.
I'll tell you what, there's a couple of things I want to mention about that, but the first one is the statement really, which I would say is a really valuable business lesson for anybody as well, is how you've persisted at it from originally starting, getting, ironing out the teething bits, getting a window where it sticks and the process, but you've stuck at it and been consistent with it, which I think is, I admire that, hats off to you. And also is a valuable business lesson generally. If you're going to do something, be consistent with it as long as it's good, because it's got a life of its own. And as UKBF SBS winners, we were at the conference, and the atmosphere in the room was phenomenal. I went along because UKBF I started 20 years ago. Sat on my kitchen table, 40 grand in debt with 3 credit cards and a bank loan, thinking, how am I keeping my business afloat? I can't be the only person. Put something online, it is what it is now, and we've got 330,000 members, and I'm able to support these people. But it's about being consistent. And I remember going around the SBS conference thinking, this is the buzz. I could feel the energy in the room of the support and everything that is there. So without a doubt, as this podcast goes out, we'll be, I'd encourage anybody listening to this to get on Twitter, get on Instagram, Sunday evenings, 6:00, and take part, because I was genuinely wowed by what I saw and what it is that you do.
Well, it's the thing is, running your own business can sometimes, especially small business, can be incredibly lonely. It doesn't matter how much passion you've got. we all have difficulties, reversals, things that could get us down. And the great thing about being part of the SBS community, you can reach out to other SBS winners in a similar industry or a different industry. But when you're finding it difficult, somebody else is doing well, and they can help you along the way. You've got something to discuss, and we don't charge. I'm very fortunate now. I funded it for the first 6-7 years, and then now we're able, maybe a bit longer, we're able now to make it self-funding because we've got some great sponsors as well. So we don't have to charge anybody to actually get involved, but it's that extra support that we all need and ideas. And when we get when we do the main conference in Birmingham, you're right, it's electric. Everybody's hanging, looking for that next idea, talking to other SBS winners, people who are presenting on the stage, all the side events that are going on, and it's a boost for the rest of the year. And you get ideas and plans, and that's why many of them return year in, year out. And we have different speakers, different workshops, and there's something to be learned. And this is not a government-funded opportunity. It's not a paid-for opportunity. It's just exclusively for SBS winners and the great sponsors that we've managed to attract to make it happen every year.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question, but you just mentioned where you had you grew your business, your finance business, and sold that, went on to run for you'd built up to a comfortable style, and you had, I'm cutting out, I appreciate a chunk of years here. One thing which, when it reached a point for you to buy Ryman, everybody was telling you not to do it. Huge risk. But despite, one would say, that advice, you went ahead and you still did. Now, history paints a very good picture. It's all the right decision to do. But when you've got the naysayers around you, that's probably an unfair term to use perhaps, but you've got people painting the risks in front of you, but you still had that determination to make that step and make that acquisition and put a lot of risk into it. Why did you still do that?
Listen, I wasn't being silly, and I wasn't being disrespectful when people were saying they didn't think it was a good idea to finance me, because I had to raise money, and that wasn't a risk they were prepared to take. I understood the business. I clearly had a plan, and you must always listen, but at the end of the day, to address the issues and what are the objections. And you're going back to your sales training. If it's got an objection, you've got to deal with the objection. You can't just ignore it. You can't go, la, 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 I'm still going to do it, la, 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 I'm still going to do it. That's not how it works. You need to listen. And I felt that at each stage, I'd given a very good and fair explanation to deal with the risks that people thought were there, and the issues, and how I was going to be dealing with them. Now, it's fair to say, it's one thing to say how you're going to deal with them theoretically and actually then executing that. But I had full confidence in my ability to execute. I didn't. It wasn't just It wasn't just, taking a flyer. I knew what I needed to do, and I knew if I had to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to execute it, I knew I could and how I would do it. And I had, we talk about Dragon's Den, but I had a business plan that was about this thick, with 3-year projections and the whole works on what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. In fact, you could argue it put people off because it was too detailed, and they thought, this guy's never going to deliver this.
Is it fair to say you listened to the objections and the challenges that people were putting forward, and you satisfied yourself that you had covered them off to the point of either turning them around, or if they weren't going to turn around, you accepted that, as far as you was concerned, those risks were addressed?
Yeah, and there were some things that I felt actually was sweating the small stuff. It wasn't necessary. It was important to them, but it really wasn't important to me in running the business. I didn't need it to be important to me. It was sweating the small stuff, and the key stuff is really where we need to focus on. And at some stage, you have to leave some stuff on the table. So you can't deal with everything day one. And yes, this is not dealt with, and we might not deal with it for a year, 2 years, but we can live with it. And it has to be dealt with. But it's not on the priority list of taking a company that was hemorrhaging and stabilising it, because that was the first job, was to stabilise. I couldn't promise everything day one. It was stabilise year one. Year two, the growth strategy. Year three, you've delivered it.
But the most important part was that everybody should keep in mind is you had a clear business plan.
Indeed, and I think that without that, I would have been foolish. And I've never ever done anything without sitting there. Listen, I'm not a gambler. I've never taken a business risk in my life. I've taken a calculated business risk, and that's a big difference to taking a risk.
I've got two last questions, if I can. First one is there a moment where you've stepped back and you've sort of looked at a round of what you have created in whatever that may be, and been one of your proudest moments?
I never do that, ever.
Why would that be?
Makes me feel very uncomfortable.
It's
very simply because you could lose it. You still have that fear.
I'd argue you can still be humble but feel proud in your achievements.
Yes, my dear old mum, before she passed away, was incredibly proud. And you say about being proud. There's lots of things I'm proud of, but I'm a terrible taskmaster to myself. I have never ever got to a point where I've complimented myself or been happy with my performance. Ever.
Is there a conscious reason behind that?
It's nothing I've sat down to plan, nothing that I've sat down to work to do. I've never ever been 100%, even when I've done well. It's always, I could have done better.
That probably leads into what my second question was, which is the title of the podcast, really. What drives people who run their own business, changes, evolves over time. From what was your motivation as a driver in the early years will be different now. I heard you say that you don't count the money, it's just a barometer. So what is your drive that makes you be a hard taskmaster for yourself now and keeps you doing what you're doing? Because some could argue you could retire now if you wanted.
Yeah, Mrs. P argues it all the time, and I said, well, we'd probably get divorced if I retired, if I was under your feet all the time. Quite honestly, I think it goes back to those days at school, if you self-analyse, which is always a difficult one to do, where I had to work harder than everybody else. I had to find those workarounds, and yes, initially everything I worked for was to make money and give my family the things that I never had. But there gets to a stage where, as you quite rightly say, you can afford to do that and hang your boots up. But if you're passionate, love what you do, enjoy what you do, people retire to do what they enjoy. Well, I'm already doing it, so why am I going to retire? I'm already fortunate enough I've had so many different types of careers. I've been involved in football. I've been involved in so many different things that I've done in my life. I've just been on TV show. You know, I've done so many things. I haven't had one 9-to-5 career path. And each time I'm excited. I'm freshening it up. I'm doing something new. I'm out of my comfort zone. I love being out of my comfort zone. I love thinking this is a challenge. You know, doing the same thing over and over again, you're right, I'd get bored. So, yeah, I'll do this until my health says otherwise, I suppose.
Absolutely. Theo, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much for speaking with me today. And I'm looking forward to getting this out and spreading the word as well for those listening to enter SBS on a Sunday, because speaking as somebody who's fortunate enough to have won SBS Small Business Sunday, it's a great resource. Thank you.
Excellent, Richard. It's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. Please remember to hit subscribe and like. It really helps us with the algorithms for YouTube, and I'll look forward to bringing you more interviews in the next episode of Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF.